Welcome to Season 4 of Everything is Learning. This season, we're celebrating neurodivergent people, their stories, strengths, challenges, and the powerful ways they learn and live. Because honoring every individual's brain and lived experience makes the world a better place for everybody. We're excited you're here. Let's dive in.
Hello! Today we are excited to welcome an incredible guest who is a dedicated advocate for neurodivergent communities. Meet Andrew Robinson, known online as My ADHD Counselor. Andrew is a licensed clinical social worker. Through his platform, he provides practical guidance, heartfelt encouragement, and is refreshingly honest about living with ADHD. Andrew combines his professional expertise with personal passion, helping others embrace their unique ways of thinking, feeling, and navigating the world. His work is rooted in compassion, humor, and the belief that neurodivergence should not only be accepted but celebrated. Andrew's counseling approach is deeply shaped by his mission to empower people with ADHD and other forms of neurodivergence to advocate for themselves, amen, build on their strengths, and find joy in messy, unpredictable processes of growth. He speaks openly about the struggles and myths surrounding ADHD and offers tools that are realistic, accessible, and rooted in lived experience rather than rigid theory. Passionate about dismantling stigma, he works to normalize conversations about mental health and help people see that support is not just about surviving, but about building a life that feels authentic and fulfilling. Hallelujah to that! Beyond his counseling work, Andrew uses his platform to bring humor and humanity into conversation about neurodivergence. He shares strategies, resources, and reflections that resonate widely because they are real, relatable, and filled with heart. A strong believer in community, he reminds his audience that no one has to walk their ADHD journey alone, and that very traits, once seen as obstacles, become powerful assets. Whether online or in session, Andrew's voice is one of encouragement, hope, and solidarity for neurodivergent people everywhere. Welcome, Andrew. Thanks so much for chatting with us today.
Thank you so much for such a kind introduction. To hear yourself get boosted like that, it's a great way to start a conversation.
Awesome.
Oh, well, we're glad. As you were reading it, though, it's really funny because I was thinking, it sounds like when you win an award.
Cool.
You're about to win an award at a ceremony. Do you know what I mean? Like somebody talks about your life. But that's truly our perspective of you and your work. So we're glad that it brought you a little upbeat.
Yeah, it's nice because you do this work and it's hard to see the impact you're making. You know what I mean? So it feels good to hear that. And I don't always believe it, but I always do appreciate it.
Well, if I could offer as a parent to actually now too, because my younger son actually got a diagnosis. So as the parent to two neurodivergent children, it's really helpful when you bring humor because there's you and there's a mom who jokes about trolling. Like she's super into the 90s and she jokes about trolling her children. And she'll after you fight, you have to say, "Are you not entertained?" Like from the Gladiator. And bringing the humor in just helps me regulate myself so I can be the best version. And because they're so young and my younger is speaking, but broken language, and my older is non-speaking. It just helps me because they can't currently advocate for themselves, but empowering me with the resources to help build that infrastructure so that they can when they're able. And that's really helpful. It's so overwhelming and daunting. And I don't need theory. I need what actually worked. And did you test it out? And what were the lessons learned? That is tried and true practice for me. I will buy into that. So
I appreciate that, right? Because I think there's always a place for theory. It's good to have theory rooted in everything we do, of course, but you're going to get lost in the woods if you try and explain how a certain theory is going to help you with remembering where you put your keys. Just give me the strategies and let me know how to do it. That's all we're looking for sometimes. And that's what I really think is important. And I'm glad that comes out in the work that I do. Is really what I try to do is I live with ADHD. I've lived with it my whole life. It's always been my soapbox. I was diagnosed when I was 3 because I got kicked out of a Montessori. And I have always found ADHD to be isolating until I got on social media. And that's what I hope to do is build this community for what I wish I would have had when I was a kid. And what I know people out there also wish they could have in their own lives.
That's beautiful.
That's amazing. That's so interesting too, because I've been following your social media, I think probably for around a year. I didn't know the backstory. I must have
Yeah.
missed that somewhere. So I'm so glad to hear all of that, because I think our listeners who maybe don't know who you are yet, I hope that brings them to you, because I mean, I told you offline, but like, we're massive fans, like massive fans. I go to Threads every day to look to see what you've posted. And I don't want to use the word troll, because you're too witty. You're not trolling people.
Yeah,
You
right.
are using wit and intelligence. Maybe
Just
some, maybe
little
some, a
bit.
little bit. But like, you're so witty. It's so intelligent. Most of the time, it's like really thought provoking too. So it like gets you to think, while you're also like, by the way, that was not smart to say. Like,
Yeah.
but I love that.
And well, yeah, I appreciate that. Like when I first got on social media, I talked a lot about my origin story, right? I was diagnosed when I was 3, medicated when I was 6. I was diagnosed with depression when I was 7 because I didn't
Wow.
understand myself, right? And I went through years and years of therapy, found psychology, fell in love with psychology, got my degree in social work, really dug my heels into ADHD and just went from there. And also with social media, I feel like I can really unfilter myself to an extent,
Yeah.
but like also it's a balance. And I think that's something I, for myself and other people, really encourage finding, because like it's easy to get sucked into that nastiness on threads. Threads can be disgusting.
It can.
And it's good to like recognize, whoa, I am just getting mean, because I can get pretty mean. And sometimes I need to like step away. But other times I just like to put people in their place. So it's a balance.
I think the
Fair.
part that I really resonate with was the fact that I think there are content creators that just want the volume of traffic and not necessarily the authenticity. And I'm not saying that you are only creating content so that you find your people, like the people that agree with you, because largely that what's happening on Threads, you find people who don't necessarily
No, sure.
aligned. But
Right.
the point is why I think we're excited that our listeners will get some exposure is the fact that you make content that is you. Like, and we were introduced, right? I indicated you felt like a friend because you're so honest. Like you're candid. What you see is what you get. Is what very much how it feels. And I don't think every platform, even ones with lots of traction, come across like that.
Yeah, I really try to, because like a lot of my clients find me on social media. Like I've done a lot of advertising on social media and built most of my caseload off of it. And I don't want people to think they're coming to someone who puts up this barrier, which you often find with a lot of the therapists. They're just kind of there to be there.
Mhm.
I really care about what I do. And I do care because I've been in that place myself. A lot of the lows that people have been, I could match it. I can out doom spiral the best of them. And I want people to understand that, because I think you should know a therapist is also a human being.
Mm.
And that's really what I always try and convey. And I'm glad that it comes across in my content, because it doesn't always feel that way.
Yeah. It's hard when you create content and you don't get feedback that directly tells you how someone is thinking or feeling or navigating
Hmm.
with it. And I think that's one of the hard parts that we're learning, because we're 1 year into podcasting and kind of content creating and stuff. And I wouldn't even necessarily call us content creators yet. We're still trying to figure that piece out. But one of the things that I think makes sense why people find you or choose you is, as a clinical social worker, you don't, I feel like you kind of talked about it a bit, and it's really that vulnerability piece. Like, hey, I'm a human. I know for me in therapy, with therapists I've had, when they share just a little piece about their life, I'm like, oh my gosh, they felt this way too. Like,
Hmm.
thank you. Like, now I feel like we can relate to each other. So I really feel heard and I really feel seen. And I think you really do that. This is really funny though, because we usually start with an icebreaker, and I feel like we're already in the thick of it. But I do want
Yeah.
to ask you a question, because we're talking about your content creation. Do you have a favorite ADHD hack that makes you laugh because it's so simple yet effective?
Yeah. So this is also the story of how I first went viral on accident. So my Instagram, kind of the background here, it blew up way quicker than I was prepared for. Like I started it and within a month I had a video take off and launched me to about 20,000 followers.
Wow.
This video, so the hack was chug a bunch of water. The goal is you're going to sit down and do as much work until you have to go to the bathroom, right? Don't give yourself a UTI. This is important here. Do as much work until you have to go. So that video took off for all the wrong reasons. People were saying you look stoned. People were saying that I'm trying to give them a UTI. It got a lot of engagement. A lot of people liked it, but it was a lot of negative engagement. But still, that's how I became viral, was just playing with a jug of water and saying, chug this water. But I like that life hack because there's a lot of different ways for people with ADHD to motivate. Like Jesse Anderson wrote a book, Extra Focus, and he talked a lot about different ways of focus that we can find or motivation. And one of them is pressure. So think things like, do I set a timer and I'm racing against the timer? I like to go as fast as I can to cook against my air fryer. Or the classic, you're not getting your hydration needs. Great. Chug some water. Do as much work until you have to pee. Like race against an internal timer. Things that are a little harder to skirt tend to be those good motivators. And so I like that one a lot. But there's so many different ones, and I could probably spend the rest of our time here going over that. But I'll leave it there for now.
Well, that's hilarious.
That is really funny.
I've never used that one in my work, but I might try it with some of my older learners.
It's a fun one.
I might even try it for myself.
Give it a go. You never know. If you're not staying hydrated, now you will.
Right. We had Annika from the Nutrimind Lab on recently.
I love Annika.
She's the best.
She is a good friend of mine. I have talked to her quite a bit. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we love her. So we just had her on, and she asked me if I had ADHD, and my background is special education. I was a teacher for forever, and now I'm a learning specialist, and I help people with executive functioning and other needs. I'm also a CSE advocate. So I said to her, I hadn't at that point gone for testing, but I found out I have ADHD traits, and I'm not diagnosed with ADHD. So one of the threads we recently posted was about, can you have ADHD traits and be considered neurodivergent, or are you not? And it led to this really interesting conversation, but I just thought it was so hilarious that Annika was like, in spending this time with you, I'm really wondering if you have ADHD. And one of the things that came up was, because I have so many strategies, it's hard to determine whether or not I have ADHD, but I at least know that I have ADHD traits, which I feel like I've known for a long time because I've always felt different and othered. And I have always joked about how like somebody needs to do like a lobotomy or like research my brain once I've gone, because something's like not, I've always said like something just doesn't feel right up there. Like something, they're going to find something really different and unique up there. But hopefully amazing, but
it's got teeth and hair. Joke. We're going to name it Matilda, something like that.
Like an inner brain inside the brain. But yeah, so I thought that was really interesting, but we loved our time with Annika, and she was talking about that. And that led me to go and figure out if I have ADHD or not. And I know that was one of our questions actually we were going to ask you is, there's this whole, not trend, but because it's not a trend, but people are self-diagnosing themselves with autism, and we know the intricacies of that piece, and that it is valid because of the lack of resources, of people out there swindling people, saying that they're going to give them, thank you, Callie, for calling me out.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. And, you know, like there's this whole piece of self-diagnosis with autism, but with ADHD, Do you find that that is also valid in other types of neurodivergence, or no?
Ye- Yeah, I mean, here's my just global thought on self-diagnosis, right? I think it serves a place. I think some things that it's important to always rule out for is trauma, medical issues, traumatic brain injury, right? So those
Mm,
things could also influence it quite a bit and make symptoms similar but different from ADHD or autism. Now, that doesn't mean that those symptoms aren't real or might not occur in addition to those things, but
mhm.
you only get so far with a self-diagnosis. You're not able to get accommodations with self-diagnosis. You're
Right.
not able to get medication with self-diagnosis. I think it's a good starting point, and I think it's also important to recognize that we live in an administration in the United States that is not making us feel safe to access mental health diagnoses. Like formal diagnoses feels like something that will be used against people. And I don't have anything that's going to prove that other than I really feel strongly that it could. So it doesn't feel safe. So self diagnosis could be a good starting point. And more often than not, the people I'm finding who are saying I'm self diagnosed, it's not who people think. It's not the kids. It's not the teenagers who saw a couple videos online and are like, yep, this is me. That exists. There's that subset. But it's more often people in their 30s, 40s, more commonly women or people assigned female at birth
Mhm.
who have been told their symptoms are just you're quirky, you're not trying hard enough, you're lazy. And those are the people that find my content or content like mine. And they start saying, huh, this is hitting a little too close to home. I'm wondering. And then they start doing more research and then they go through the self diagnoses. Those are the people that I find tend to be self diagnosing rather than the people who are like kind of doing it for the trend.
I'm actually
Yeah.
so glad that you spoke about that demographic because the reality is, I also hear what's trending is people believe that there is this increased amount of people with certain conditions, autism, ADHD,
Mhm.
what have you. And the reality is, and I appreciate what you had said about people who are ascribed as female at birth being ones because the medical research was largely based on male research.
White
And
white
on top
Mhm.
of
males.
all of that, yes, thank you, white males. On
White.
top of all of that, the reality is these people, like, what, regardless of what you believe about the capacity to diagnose, those people existed before the diagnosis. Diagnosis only happened because people started spotting trends and
Mhm.
because people started researching it when they spotted trends. So the reality of this whole notion that, oh, wow, like there's been this huge uptick. No, we know more now and we changed our opinion, or based on scientific evidence, we changed our practices because of the capacity that you took the knowledge that you know now and included it in something. And so I really appreciate what you said about the specific portion of people who you see, like you mentioned, there are children, there are teenagers, but it's because they didn't have enough information at the time to people got excluded.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's also the way the symptoms present, right? Like, think of how a boy is raised and how a girl is raised. Like,
Mm,
people assign male, people assign female. A boy is going to get away with more of those externalized behaviors. So more of them will show up because you're getting away with it. Girls are tend to be more overcorrected. Those
mhm.
behaviors tend to become internalized. They seem like inner struggles written off as anxiety or depression, and you're just diagnosing the common cold or cough when you're missing the source of the cough. And also, we are screening younger.
Mm,
Teachers are
so
getting
true.
trained in recognizing
Well said.
ADHD and autism,
Mhm.
and it's more readily accessible how we have the information at our fingertips, like you were saying. ADHD in the symptom cluster was first described in like the early 1800s in Sir Alexander Crichton's book. It's not new. What we're describing is just getting more well defined.
Right.
It's always been there. And so the dismissal of it being this fad or trend, one, it's having dangerous impacts. We have an administration that's looking at people as autism and the rising rates as the problem. and not as a solution of we're having better access to mental health that it is.
Yeah.
It's good that we're catching more people. Could things be contributing to these conditions? Sure. That doesn't mean that these conditions are out of control because of something inherently wrong.
Right.
Right.
No evidence supports any of the claims being made. So I think it's important to recognize that symptoms have always existed. People will still need to get diagnosed, but it's also not safe. So self-diagnosis might be the safest option for right now. And it's valid. As a therapist, I believe it's valid. It doesn't mean I might understand it a little differently as a therapist when I see you, but you are inside your own body a lot more than I ever will be. You are your own lived expert at the end of the day. You know what you need.
Yeah. That's amazing to have somebody say that out loud. Just knowing that somebody feels like you are in charge of yourself. I think that's not a message that a lot of people get. And whatever someone's feeling is super valid. And that's something that I feel like I learned being in the classroom from learners was like, I don't understand this. And instead of saying, oh, okay, well, you should understand this, or this is how I taught this, or whatever, it was okay, like, well, how are you understanding it? Or what are you thinking? Or what do you think is the holdup? And then to empower someone to be able to come up with language or some way of expressing themselves to say, like, oh my gosh, look at the connection you just made. Like, you really know yourself best. And every
Mhm.
single brain is different, and everybody's lived experience is different. And there are some similarities between people, but everybody's lived experience with autism is different. Everyone's lived experience with ADHD is different. Everybody's lived, I don't like the word neurotypical. I understand the purpose of it, but do you have another word that you use instead of neurotypical?
I
do.
use neurotypical.
Do
I
you?
don't have one.
How about
Okay.
neuronormative? Does that seem a little more favorable to you? Because we've talked about that a couple times before. What about neuronormative? I
Yeah,
think the
well,
reason you don't like it is because the word typical is in
I
it.
absolutely do. It's a word that I feel should be burned. I
Right,
don't think
but they're
saying
just
somebody is typical, saying somebody's brain is typical, saying anything is typical. It's rooted in segregation societally, in my opinion,
and privilege.
and
yeah,
privilege.
well, you hear a lot of like the neurodivergent supremacy talk that comes with that framing. People who are neurotypical can't do X, Y, or Z, but we're so much better because of this. And that's wrong too.
Right,
I think it's important to recognize brains will work differently. Some are as society deems standard,
right,
right? But that doesn't mean like put them in another culture, they would be typical. Put them in another time period and they'd be typical, right? It's the setting in which you are that makes things typical within reason,
right,
of course, because like you will all like people with ADHD have existed throughout forever and the struggles were there forever. It's the society we're in doesn't function for a neurodivergent mind. It
right,
isn't created to make systems in place. And we see those systems even further being eroded as this administration cuts resources or cuts mental health grants or things of that nature. So to be neurodivergent is to diverge from how you would be able to function within a typical society. But like, our bodies weren't built to work 8-hour workdays. That's not how humanity was designed. So what's typical is a real moving target too, which is difficult to keep up with.
right. I think that's a really great point too. At the end of what you were saying is like it's hard to keep up with that. In all honesty, because from what I've understood, I'm still considered neurotypical, not neurodivergent, because I only have traits, not the disorder. But one of the things that I feel like is important too is as a neurotypical person, I struggle to keep up with things for neurodivergent people too.
Mhm.
And I feel like the world is just changing so much so quickly. And I want to make sure that I'm keeping up. So I follow accounts like yours because I'm able to keep up and keep on my toes and keep learning. And I feel like what we all keep going back to too, when we go back and we talk about historically in the 1800s, is everything is learning. And as we are learning, we're growing. And as we're growing, we're developing. And as we're developing, we come up with new strategies and new ways to help people and new ways to affirm people. And I think that that's also important to also recognize.
I don't necessarily know this. What you just said, Lane, made me think of this, but I think the other reason that you come across so authentic, or that in many ways, even as informal as some of your posts are, there's like credential behind it, because you are someone who is neurodivergent talking about people of neurodivergence versus me. I am neurotypical. I'm just an ally and an advocate for loved ones and other people. And so if I say something, I'm not coming from lived experience. I mean, I am in the sense that like I'm caring for and keeping these young ones alive, but like I didn't go through it. And so hearing it from your perspective, but something in my son's recent diagnosis that I loved is, this would, I imagine, is true with ADHD, and you can literally cut and paste a new word here. But if you've met a person with autism, you've just met one person with autism. If
Yep.
you've met a person with ADHD, you've just met one person with ADHD. One individual, one account does not give you the broad stroke spectrum of what this is going to be like. And that's exactly why it's a spectrum. Although I will be honest, it wasn't until doing this podcast, and I really got to give credit to Elena where Elena's due. It's not like a spectrum when you draw it. It's like a linear thing, but it's not. It's like the spider web diagram, or even like oh man, Elena,
It's like a color wheel.
Yeah, a color wheel, but no, it was like with the music panel. I forget, like the control board, right? You have some that are turned up. And I really like that analogy, because that is really what it's like. You know, my one child is speaking, my other child is not. So one dial's up, one dial's down, or what they can tolerate. Oh, my one hates long sleeves, anything on their head. I could pile on, and I think the other one wouldn't even be phased. And so, yeah, exactly. And so that like, I really appreciate that you're talking from a place of lived experience, because it feels different, because I feel like our administration talks for people when they know nothing about what it's like to live with that condition. Get someone in there who has that lived experience. Okay, I'll buy into what they're saying. But
maybe. Probably not still.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. It's a maybe. But I honestly would probably take there's a different credibility there, and it will hit different because it's someone who actually went through it. And so I just wanted to offer, when thinking about that, and what Elena and you were just talking about, that's, I think, largely why people are able to connect with you so deeply.
Yeah. And that's always been something that I try and be conscious of, right? Because like, for example, when I joined TikTok pretty early on, I started exploring if I myself have autism, and I was doing these daily posts of my self exploration. At that point, I concluded I don't, but I've thought more about it, and I'm starting to lean more towards that I do. But like, I always feel that it's important to be authentic with who I am. There's nothing about me that I think is worth hiding, in that sense of like, I have ADHD. I am not like, I was diagnosed young and I had a lot of privilege in that, but that doesn't mean I don't struggle. And that doesn't mean that I'm not going to have some of the same struggles people do. I have a lot of privilege, and I try and own that. And I think, my lived experience came from someone who had ample resources, good supports, good therapy, to be able to be where I am today. That is a privilege.
Right.
I always try and be conscious that my experience is a privileged one. Not everyone had those same privileges, nor is afforded those same accesses to resources. So like, language like ADHD is a superpower. Those are things that I've steered away from and pivoted from, because maybe if you have the right context, supports, and situations, the hyper focus, the creativity things that you can channel might feel like superpowers for you. But not everyone has that privilege.
Mhm.
People are going to truly be disabled by ADHD and can truly be disabled by autism.
Mhm.
And to frame it in that way is very othering. So
Mhm.
I try and make sure that I'm conscious of this is my experience, my very privileged, very specific experience that is not universally applicable. And I think, as you're saying, that's what makes it relatable. I know where I am and I own exactly where I am, flaws and all. I'm not perfect. I own that as best as I can when I need to.
Yeah. No, it's all of what you said is just, it's so wonderful to hear from another human being. And I just think that the more you share yourself, Andrew, like the world is just going to keep changing and the right people are going to continue to find you and also be inspired to continue to do that. And I think two things that you talked about, because I had told my sister in another episode about one of my clients who I absolutely adore. Um, their parent talks about how their ADHD is a superpower. And when I was talking to this person, they're a teenager, um, one day they were just crying and they were like, it's not a superpower. Like whenever my parent tells me that, like I feel like I'm failing them and I'm failing my teachers and I'm
Mhm.
failing myself, and it just, the weight of the world is sitting on me and I can't move, I can't function. And they didn't leave their bedroom for 2 days. And every time it comes up, the parent thinks that it's this amazing thing because the parent has owned that they have ADHD and that it's their superpower because that's how they framed it for them, but never asked their child how they felt about it. And hearing that that child felt othered, that the weight of that superhero perspective weighed on them, was so powerful for me to hear, because I haven't said that to people, but I know that people say that to other people, like ADHD is my superpower or autism is my superpower. And I think that's really interesting the way that you laid that out, as for some people that's okay that they say that, because my perspective since that conversation with this student was that it's not okay to say it because it does other, it doesn't recognize the struggles that go along with a diagnosis, in those pieces. But I'm glad that you reframed it for me, so that if somebody says that's how they feel about their diagnosis, then that's exactly how I should tell them that they should feel, and I should not try to convince them otherwise. And I don't think that I have, but I want to be really mindful that I don't. The other thing
Yeah.
you talked about was privilege. And I recently learned that masking is a privilege. And that's something I've never heard before. And I was wondering if you can talk about your experience with masking and unmasking and kind of the sense of privilege from that.
Yeah. I mean, it is, right? The ability to be unmasked without consequences. So I'm a cisgendered Caucasian white guy. For me to unmask, I have a lot of privilege. People aren't really going to bother me because I am baseline considered non threatening, right? So if I'm a little more, like if I'm sitting weird or doing something, people aren't going to feel uncomfortable or say something that is problematic. So it's safer for me to unmask. I can take a little bit more chances when I unmask. And granted, I still mask a quite a good amount, especially in like the workplace environment. I really will put up a certain degree of like, I'm not going to be fully rambly or like fidgeting constantly. I'll put up some barriers. However, not everyone is afforded that privilege.
Right.
People of color, people who are going to face real consequences. Like if you're in an environment where you could be perceived as dangerous or treated poorly, like people of color could face more negative interactions with the police, right? We saw this happen
Yeah.
not too long ago. And so it could lead to really negative consequences
Right.
when those things happen. So not everyone is afforded the safety to unmask. And so I think unmasking in that way is a privilege, but it also can become something that has consequences when overused. If you mask too often, you're going to feel fatigued. You're going to feel drained. You're going to feel very like forced in the settings that you're in, and it's going to be harder to show up to those situations. I think it's finding a safe balance, and whatever that balance is very dependent on you, your life, and your situation.
Mhm.
And if you can't unmask safely, it's being prepared to deal with the ramifications of I've masked and then therefore I feel worse. But generally speaking, most people can tell when we're masking, and like they tend to perceive that as more uncomfortable for them than when we're unmasked. So comfort level for other people can be a role that can be considered, but also at the same time, it's not going to be universally making people more safe around you or feeling more safe around you. There isn't a one size fits all answer to it, but there is a lot of tips on how to unmask, like thinking of times when you feel authentic. What makes you feel more comfortable in a situation? What makes you feel like you're forced? What situations in a social setting are you monitoring? Which ones are necessary? Which ones are more to try and make yourself feel more in control of a situation that's out of your control?
Hmm.
It shows up in a lot of little ways. And I think it's just finding what that balance looks like for yourself is really the way that your masking or unmasking journey should go, in my opinion.
I know that you didn't specifically talk about this, and as I had mentioned, I am not neurodivergent, but I also think age plays a factor. Like,
Hmm.
the ability to mask and unmask, it's even just, like, conceptually to understand the concept, to know that you're doing it, but also, like, at school, for instance. I can't remember the technical term. I saw a mom, talk about it, but it's like when kids come home from school and they just kinda crash because they've been masking, because it feels safer to do that and go with the flow, not stand out. You wanna acclimate, have friends, you don't wanna constantly get on. I know you had mentioned you got kicked out of Montessori school, so I imagine that there was some level of or nature of masking and unmasking there, right? Like, and like the threshold, right? And so when my son comes home, from the various things, I do feel like I get the truest version of him, which isn't always the happiest version of him. And it makes me sad that is his experience, but I'm also hopeful in the sense that like I must be a safe enough person that he can show up how he's actually
Hmm.
feeling. I really appreciate that. And since you have gone down the track of being a little bit vulnerable, would you mind talking to when you strip away your clinical identity and online presence? Who are you when no one's watching, and how does ADHD show up there?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a fun one because, like, if you were to ask my wife this, she would tell you for sure I have ADHD. I used to take it as a compliment that, like, a lot of people could never tell I had ADHD. I hid it very, very well. As I've gotten older, that started to shift, but I show much more emotion in my personal life. I am a very emotion driven person, and that's one of the biggest things both I love about myself and I struggle with myself. I feel things
Mm,
very deeply. I can go to very dark places. I can also be have a lot of energy. I can be a lot of fun. Like I can be creative. I come up with play therapy ideas on the spot. I come up with games on the spot. Like I'm very quick on my feet. I'm good in a crisis. I've learned that the hard way that after my father died, like I was able to zone in. Like in that moment I showed up as the person I needed to, and I think that was a lot of adrenaline fueled focus.
mm,
I can be very scattered. My wife found a video once of like, oh, people with ADHD leave the cabinet open all the time. At first she thought it was funny, and it's not as funny anymore. She does not like when I leave cabinets and open. I can be forgetful. I'm very spacey. My working memory is not always great. I can get very inattentive. I could be listening and then I'm like, wait, what? I'll hear something and I won't internalize it. ADHD has always been a part of my life, but so too are the accommodations. I use phone reminders. I try and incentivize myself. Like when I fold laundry, I listen to music. Um, but at the end of the day, you strip a lot of those things away, and I'm pretty much the same person you get. There isn't a whole lot of facade that I put up other than I just don't make the conversation about myself.
mm,
I am who I am. And I've learned for me that trying to be anything other than who I am, it's too much work. And I can put on a good show, and I can when I need to. I did competitive speech and debate, so I know how to talk pretty.
Way
But
cool.
yeah, it was fun. There's a whole story there. Uh, but I find that for me, I think being myself is the best thing I can do. And I think that gives me it, like you've said, it's why I'm authentic because there isn't much I feel the need to hide. And life is short. I lost my dad when I was
So sorry.
pretty young. So yeah, I was in my early 20s when my dad passed away. And so losing a parent that way, you realize how short life is and how many things you're going to regret if you don't just do them.
Mm.
Granted, I'm not perfect and that doesn't always show up in everything that I do, but I try to be the most real version of myself that I can be. And I think that's how I try and live my life.
It's a lovely way to be.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, I can only imagine what losing a parent must feel like at that age when you're still learning so much about yourself, and who to be and who you want to be. And the fact that you've turned your grief into something special that's hard to do. We've learned a lot about grief. We learned a lot last season about grief, and the fact that you've been able to do that is really remarkable.
Yeah, it didn't come easily, right? And it's one of the hardest things that I will always grapple with is that the person that I grew up because of the grief never got to know my dad that way. That's a hard thing to swallow. Losing someone and not getting to have that fullness of the relationship, it hurts. We were watching an old video from my childhood last night, and again, he passed away in 2017. I just sobbed. My wife and I both sobbed watching the video, just hearing his voice, seeing him, knowing that there's a version of him in my home as an adult, as a married person that he's never going to know. And it's a bittersweet thing because I'm proud of the person I've become, but I've accepted that he won't get to know that version of me.
Yet.
It is what it is. It hurts, and it will always hurt.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that you saying that, just another piece of your vulnerability. I think there are people out there who are really going to align with that too. And I think for as witty as you could be, you've talked about how you can be dark and deep too. And I think sharing that is just, thank you for sharing that with us. And thank you for trusting us with that.
Of course.
How has your own relationship with ADHD evolved since you publicly started advocating for others? And have there been moments where your audience has maybe changed your perspective?
Yeah. Well, great question. I used to be Neurospicy Counseling. That was my original username.
Yeah.
It was brought to my attention. Black Spectrum Scholar and a bunch of other users helped me understand that that's not a good term. A lot of people feel that is a sexualized and inappropriate term. I didn't know that when I chose the username.
Mm-hmm.
I have since rebranded because I've learned the harm that it causes and don't want to continue to perpetuate that harm. I have learned a lot more about my ADHD throughout this process as well. I think that, I was pretty attuned to my ADHD. I've always have been and always was. But since starting creating content, I've read like 20, 25 more books. I've done trainings. I've really listened to my audience. So I've learned more about ADHD. I learned a lot about executive functioning that I really didn't know, but it makes sense and it's a good reframe for what ADHD is. So I think learning about those different varieties, experiences of what ADHD has really taught me about myself. And I've been able to learn new life hacks or strategies to manage my ADHD as well as help others manage theirs, but also really I think the biggest thing I changed was my relationship with my emotions. Granted, it's not perfect, but I am a lot better at self-regulating. And I think a lot of that came from the vulnerability that I've had with myself, with my audience, in really applying some of the strategies that I teach people. So I think overall it's given me a much healthier relationship with my ADHD. albeit it's something that's always on my mind. But it's been positive in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. I was Marissa, I know, had talked about her favorite um content that
Video.
you
Yeah.
created, but mine was actually your interview with Callie and how you guys talked about that, because I didn't know that either, and I thought that that term was really clever, and it's like, oh yeah, like spicy brains, like all that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. And even now it just came up, I think yesterday on Threads, people were talking about it again. And there are some people like you who were like, oh, I didn't know the context. Now that I've learned, I absolutely won't use that and I will change. And then there are other people who are like fighting against it and like defending it. And you're like,
Yeah,
even though you know that something hurts somebody, you're still using it. And it's just so interesting how, again, you showed up vulnerably. You were like, oh, well, thank you for letting
not
me
at
know.
first.
I learned.
And
Oh, okay. So
uh,
can you tell us about
yeah,
that?
yeah, I should be honest about that, and I want to be honest about that. I at first put up a lot of resistance.
Okay.
I started blocking people. I started trying to avoid it and hoped it would go away. Eventually, I turned around and faced a lot of that criticism, but I was avoidant because I thought this is just a small minority. Enough people agree with me. I can move past this.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't the right call. And I sat with it long enough because I was really uncomfortable. And my discomfort was leading my reactions. That wasn't the right move. I acted much more reactively in response to those things. Eventually, I got there, but I understand the desire people have to say, well, it doesn't bother me. I should be fine with it. But enough people and enough communities have expressed harm. And if you're hearing harm from within your own community, you can't ignore that. I tried to, but I was wrong. And that's why I interviewed Callie. That's why I had that conversation. That's why I made content around the harm that Neurospicy caused, because I know that it was inherently causing harm to the community.
Wow. I wish there were
Right?
more leaders, people in my circle of reference that were like you,
Yes.
because it's hard to admit you're wrong.
It
And
was.
and
It was
but
really uncomfortable.
right, and it is like I've been wrong before. I've said wrong things before, and you try and do better next time. And it's hard because they're like in a culture that demands immediacy and like everything is at your fingertips and you can get new information immediately and everybody's opinion regardless of how it makes one feel is out there, and you can find enough people to rally to the cause because anything can be skewed. It's
Mhm.
really incredible that
Yeah.
you were able to, I mean, again, not without some trials and tribulations, but that you can own, and you didn't even just, okay, like, cave in the sense that, like, you've changed, but you educated yourself. You learned. You educated yourself. You took the extra step, like, "Okay, yeah, I was resistant. I own that I was wrong, and now here's what I am doing." And it's not even like amends, it was just your own edification. I I'm a curious person by nature, so if someone disagrees with me, doesn't always feel comfortable, but I am always interested in the why. And, that has really proven effective for me in the sense that, like, I if nothing else, I gained new perspective. And I don't have to agree with it to try and learn it, unlearn it. It's just like, does it resonate with me or does it not? And then I choose whether or not to act on that. And I really just think that if more people had taken the approach, regardless of how long it took them to get there, right? If more people had just taken your approach of trying to, within your own community, are there people like I want to even cater to within your own family, right? Because like this, we're getting closer to Thanksgiving, and I know that that can be a really sensitive time for some people. Not just whether you're neurodivergent or not, in any intersectionality of your beings, there are probably people that you will encounter at your family holiday celebrations that don't align with everything. And I wish more people would do what you did. Like,
Yeah, that was a master class in apologizing and also ownership and learning.
Yeah.
So
I
thank
mean,
you.
it was a good lesson for me. And I hope to continue to do better from those experiences. I am not perfect
Mhm.
and will always try to do better after each time that I learn, but it's not easy. And
No.
it's not supposed to be easy. You should be uncomfortable challenging views that you've held for a while. Like, I just liked a term. I didn't take the time to consider it. I'm glad that I did because and I've landed on a rebrand that feels more aligned with me too. It speaks to who I am. I am an ADHD counselor through and through. And that's kind of you see what you get. And it's not as fuzzy or busy. And I got a lot of heat on the other side of people saying I shouldn't cave and I shouldn't do it. But in my heart, I knew I was making the right call and I couldn't listen to the voices that allowed me to be resistant to change.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about your rebrand though is by saying my ADHD counselor, I already feel a connection to you. I feel
Yep.
like a hug. And
Yep.
I also know that you are witty and you are sharp and you are um just I still get all of that from you. So the
Good.
way that you were trying to use spicy as a way to identify all of those things that I think encompass what you were trying to not lose, you haven't lost it.
Yeah. And that's what I was hoping for. It was a lot of because I was just about to launch my brand kit and I had everything set up for neurospicy counseling. I had paid for it and everything. But I was like, you know what? I'll take the hit because this is too important. Yeah, it was frustrating and that led into my resistance, but I'm glad I did what I did. I really, really love my rebrand in it. Like it feels right.
Feels right to us too, for whatever that
Agreed. What, in
is.
fact, so I really got to chalk it up to. I'm glad that we are doing this podcast, and I'm glad that I have been able to meet people like you, because when Elena first told me that you were going to be a guest, I was like, "Oh, who is this?" And she goes, "My ADHD counselor," and I thought she was like actually talking about her specific counselor, and so I was like, "Oh, how cool! I didn't know you did that." And she's like, "What do you mean?" And specifically like that bonding to me, because I feel such a type of way. So I like to talk specifically more about this because this feels true to my core. You and I and Elena, we're all ardently and openly opposed to RFK Jr. His beliefs, the impacts he's had on citizens since joining the administration. I can't wait for his impeachment or to hold him accountable. But why? Like, can you help? Like, what are people missing and how can others join the fight?
Yeah. So I'm gonna make this quick. So he my feeling, right? He had a kid that developed a peanut allergy. And when that kid developed a peanut allergy, he went down a really dark anti-vaxxer rabbit hole. So much so, he got involved in Samoa in their MMR experience. And because of this, they had a resurgence of measles, not unlike what we're seeing in our own country. He is very dangerously leaning into non scientific anti vaccination rhetoric that is really fueling this dangerous subset of our population.
Yes.
People who think that the ingredients in vaccines cause autism are the same people who didn't read the Wakefield study and didn't understand the fact that it had 12 participants, used unethical practices that the children themselves said caused harm and were distressing, falsified information in the study,
Medical
and
information.
also and it was funded by the people suing the makers of the MMR vaccine. These are the scientists that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is listening to. In my profile, in my bio, I have started a petition to get him removed from office. I also have letter templates to help remove him from office. My goal is that, but we'll see where it goes.
It's a great goal.
It's our goal too.
Yeah.
Yay.
That was very succinct.
It was.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we talked offline about the most recent comments that RFK has made. But I think my favorite comment is, and I'm paraphrasing here, but you shouldn't take medical advice from him.
Yep.
That's my favorite
Yeah.
comment he said. I think
Yeah.
that everyone should follow that because it came from the source. Please don't follow my medical advice. Why are we following his medical advice? No one should be. He even told us not to. That's enough for me. Andrew, we cannot thank you enough for being here. We admire your work. We have loved learning from you. And we just can't thank you enough. And we hope to have you back.
It was
I
awesome.
would love to come back. This was such a pleasure. We could keep talking and still have things to talk about. It's amazing, and I really appreciate being here.
Thank you for all you
thank
do.
So much.
Great
and to our
meeting you.
Thank you.
listeners, we know you enjoyed this conversation, so stay tuned for our next incredible neurodivergent guest. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Everything is Learning. If you loved this episode, share it, subscribe to hear more awesome content, and let's keep the conversation going. Stay curious and keep learning. We'll catch you next time.